Welcome to Words That Matter, a modern day book club. I'm your host, Lee Smith. And this morning we have such a fun show. It's a friend, someone I respect tremendously, someone I've known for a while, someone I've learned so much from. And he's just a terrific writer. He's the author of several other books, including Sandstorms and Translating Los Angeles. He is also our country's premier translator of Arabic literature. He's translated novels, perhaps most famously by the Nobel Prize-winning Egyptian novelist Naguib Mahfouz. He is also a retired. I believe he's retired. He'll fill us in more if he can. A retired intelligence officer who left the CIA, one of our most highly decorated spies, and as he explains in his new book, in Obscura, Adventures in the World of Intelligence, he's also one of America's most glamorous spies. And his new book, in Obscura, it's a beautiful, wonderful, exciting book. It's the story of a good man who was always in the most interesting place at the most important time. And that man is Peter Theroux. Peter, thank you so much for being here with us today on Words That Matter.
Good morning, Lee. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So look, Peter, I don't think there's anything like this in all of American literature. A book that covers both the world of American literature. There's a scene where you're sipping martinis with the irascible Gore Vidal. There's another scene where you're at a party having a great time, and it appears you're discreet as the intelligence officer you are, but you're very discreet. But it seems to me that you're describing a party with Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon, where you're celebrating, among other things, their famous movie Thelma and Louise. So you're at that party, and from that party, you go to Langley, Virginia, where you get a polygraph test to join the Central Intelligence Agency. So it's mind blowing how you go from one world to another. If you can tell us, if you can explain how you got there, how you got from Hollywood. You're a pillar of one of America's most famous literary families, including the novelist Paul and Alexander Theroux, and your nephew, Justin, the screenwriter and actor. So you went from that world to the CIA. How did it happen?
Well, what happened, it was mind-blowingly scary, Lee, because I was writing for National Geographic. I was doing field work for them. I was living here in LA, and I spent a few visits with Gore Vidal at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I was interviewing him, but he was a drinker, and we had that in common. I was wrapping up a career as a writer and translator and weighing the options. I had family reasons as well for maybe wanting to go back to the East Coast, like you. That's where I'm from. By the way, thank you for. I'm the best Arabic translator in the country. You just guaranteed I'll get beaten up in the parking lot at the next American Translators Association.
Oh yeah, it's a rough crowd. It's a rough crowd. The American
Translators and the interpreters don't even start. But the deal was that I was already in the paid service of the CIA because I was doing unclassified Arabic to English translation work for an outfit that doesn't exist anymore or exists under a different name. It was called the Foreign Broadcast Information Service. It became the Open Source Center and various other things. So it was actually not a very big step to doing the polygraph, getting the full top secret clearance. And for family and personal reasons, I went to, I started working for the agency as a full-time employee, full-time analyst.
Okay, so for family reasons, what did your family say? Because you have an interesting background. Again, with all of the writers and famous people in your family, your family also has something of a CIA background too. So they're
but my oldest brother Eugene was a case officer. He was an operative. The word spy doesn't apply to everybody. We throw it around, but my oldest brother was a case officer in East Asia. Whereas I was a headquarters analyst and then a a field officer in various capacities in war zones. I was in Iraq, I was in Afghanistan, I was in a couple of black sites, which is in the book. It's, of course, as we know, it's in Obscura Part 1, because I can't write Part 2 until I let go of my experience. But I was in a couple of black sites, which made it through the review. I submitted the manuscript, of course, to the pre-publication review people. They took out a few small things, but because I did not identify the location of the black site, which is a sensitive thing, they let me write about debriefing terrorists and so on.
So yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Are you allowed to talk about debriefing, interrogating terrorists?
I was not an interrogator. I was a debriefer. Sometimes there was an interrogator in the room. The interrogator is the first person when the terrorist is caught in various, often nasty circumstances. The first person they see when the bag comes off over their head is the interrogator, who bonds with them and works with them and makes them realize, now you are a captive. You don't have any more control. When they've been through that process, they meet someone like me, who is a debriefer, who under very strict circumstances with cameras running and security guards in the room, I ask them questions. They have one wrist handcuffed to a ring in the floor. The other one is free to drink tea or eat a snack, which I have provided for them, and so on. And they answer questions, and we derived a huge amount of intelligence that way, despite what detractors of the program say.
They say that there was no intelligence gathered from the.
Torture doesn't work well. It wasn't torture. We don't torture them. Another mutual friend of ours, Christopher Hitchens, the late Hitchens, had himself waterboarded famously to see if it was torture.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
It took him a second round to decide that it was torture, and of course, the Peters and Lees of the world reminded him, Christopher, if you ask for it to be done to you again, it probably isn't torture. This isn't like having your fingernails pulled out. Yeah, right. Let me do it again and let me really see if it's torture. So, the program had its detractors.
Right. I'd forgotten about that. Why did Hitchens have to go back a second time to see if it was torture?
So the first time, it left him mystified. I think if you're really screaming and never want it to happen to you again, then it might be torture. Or if you don't live to ask for it to be done to you again.
Right. Yeah, I guess if you have your nails on your left hand pulled out, you don't need to ask, well, I'm not sure if that was torture. Can you do it on the right hand too? Right.
My objection there, one final note on the enhanced interrogation techniques, is that the problem of having them revealed and condemned and so on and so forth, our focus was on the badness of doing that, which I disagree with that completely. But the terrorists learned our methods. They started waterboarding each other and doing all this stuff to each other as countermeasures. Because, when the Americans capture you, this is what they're going to do to you. So thank you, Washington Post and everybody in Washington. Now you've given us their playbook. So they started doing what Hitchens did. We're going to go through all the measures, sleep deprivation and waterboarding and so on and so on. There were 13 of them. And they were prepared to be captured.
Right. ISIS. In fact, ISIS calls it the Hitchens Protocol, I think. No, of course not. Well, look, Peter, so this is volume 1, and you say that in volume 2. I don't want to rush through volume 1 because I want to, but I want to ask a little bit about what you were not able to get in volume 1. So there was a pre-publication review that you have to go through. Is that just the CIA that does that, or are there other government agencies?
No, really? if you've held the clearance or continue to hold one, but you separate from government service, you are required. Not everybody does it. Some people blow it off, but you're required when you sign a secrecy agreement. The first day you're hired. And you do sign a secrecy agreement. It's sort of like a non-disclosure agreement. You agree that you will not violate the secrecy rules, and that anything you publish will be reviewed for the use or the compromise of sensitive information. beyond, because I hold a clearance still at this moment, I cannot write part 2, or rather I can write it, I just can't publish it yet. Because I am held to the standard, anyone still holding a clearance is held to the standard of a current overt employee, which means I can't criticize U.S. government policy or those of our allies. Because if our allies read someone like me criticizing them, they're going to say, oh, there's bias and judgment issues inside the U.S. government, that they're not fair to us. So only after I separate can I get on, talk a little bit more about my career and get a little bit more opinionated about a country like Iran, which is currently absolutely mystifying so many of us about how deferential this administration is. And it killed me to not be as opinionated as I could be in part 1, but just wait.
Well, let me ask you, in part 1, were there people that you, were there government officials that you wanted to be critical of? Can you talk about that? Can you say who you were? Because in Iraq, I mean, you had lots of congressional delegations coming through and stuff. And then also when you were at Langley, you're working with lawmakers. So were there people who stuck out for you, people who are deserve the criticism?
Yeah. There's a former ambassador, I refer to him as a bastard. In the book, they let me say that because no one disagrees about that person. I won't name him on your show. In Iraq, the annoyance was, and I got away with a little bit of this, was Joe Biden came as a senator, Carl Levin of Michigan, Kurt Rowland of Pennsylvania, and they come there to ostensibly in their role on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee or something, and they're usually bipartisan when they visit. But they're there, it's a campaign visit. They go, if they're the Maryland or Delaware Army National Guard or Michigan National Guard is up in Mosul or Tikrit or somewhere, they want a photo op so they can go back and pretend they spent hours with our great servicemen and women. I gave them intelligence briefing in Baghdad. Biden was by far the worst. And
really?
He interrupts and laughs and winks and no. And he's a horrible listener. And he just can't wait to get his photo op and get out of the country. And I was a deputy chief there. The chief refused to talk to him because I really won't use language that my superiors used about Biden. But the pre-publication review people did review and redact some of my comments about Biden because they were negative. They were really negative. And he's our president.
Peter, I want to get to Iran, because this was one of the things that you worked on. You worked on Iran. There's Iranian proxies that you also worked on. I want to get to that in just 1 minute. We have to take a quick break because there's a whole bunch of people watching on YouTube. And if they're watching on YouTube, you have to make the jump with us to Epoch TV exclusively. Please make sure you make the jump because Peter Theroux, the author of the brand new book, In Obscura Adventures in the World of Intelligence, is going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Iran, what's going on with American policy, what this administration is getting wrong, and the kind of dangers that this poses to the world. Peter, again, has seen this up close. Peter worked on hugely important files in the intelligence community. Great guy, great writer, amazing life. Make sure to make the jump. We'll see you in less than a minute. Imagine if you had to move to a different place to go to a different restaurant. If there's only one restaurant in your community and you didn't like the food and they didn't care because that's the only show in town. This is what our system is based on.
The problem is that we assign millions of families to a one-size-fits-all system that by definition is never going to meet the needs of various families that just disagree about how they want to raise their children. If families have a say in their kids' education, the public schools shape up fast. 26 to 29 studies find positive effects of school choice competition on the outcomes in the public schools. It's a win-win solution.
What are the things between different private schools, charter schools, alternate public schools, and also homeschooling? I want to know what people are choosing. Corey DeAngelis, author of The Parent Revolution. Make sure you make the jump to Epoch TV.